Well, ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor to moderate this concluding panel of the Warsaw Security Forum with a star-studded cast here. We are waiting on one of our panelists who will join us shortly, but we've got Bill Browder, who is the head of the global Magnitsky for Justice campaign, the architect of the U.S. Magnitsky Act. We have Zhanna Nemtsova, who is the head of the Boris Nemtsov Foundation for Freedom. We have, of course, Arseniy Yatsenyuk, the former Prime Minister of Ukraine and the head of the Kyiv Security Forum. And fashionably late, Toomas Ilves, the former president of Estonia from 2006 to 2016, if I have my dates correct. So the title of the panel is, of course, Reset with Russia. It feels like we've watched this movie so many times before, Bill. What is it about either Russia's leadership or about American presidents that they feel compelled with every new administration to launch a reset that always results in disappointment, increasing repression in Russia, and more hostility between the West and Russia as a result? And yet they keep coming back to this. What is the cause of this repeating itself time and time again?
Yeah, it really is very frustrating. When I put my book out, Red Notice, one of the people who read it was George W. Bush, and he invited me to lunch at the Bush Library. And I said to him, what was this about looking into Putin's eyes and seeing his soul? And he said, yeah, that was the first meeting. The next 20 were absolutely terrible. He's a monster. And then, of course, Obama had the Russian reset with the red button, and then, of course, we all know how that went. I think what happens is these American presidents show up. Becoming the American president is a pretty tough thing to do. It's not an easy task. And I think that these guys are so full of themselves when they become president. They think, I just became the president of the United States. I'm the most powerful man in the world. I'm so good. I'm so special that my personal charisma is going to win the day with Vladimir Putin. And they show up and they do this. And Putin just sits there and smiles, and he thinks, okay, I've got between 6 and 9 months of free reign to do whatever I want while they're resetting. And of course and then it all never works out. Trump wanted to, he had a good relationship with Putin. He's such a great guy. Everything was going to be great with Putin. He was going to end the war in 24 hours, and of course that didn't happen. And it's nothing to do with the Russians. I mean, they'll take advantage of every opportunity they have. This is just pure, sort of arrogance on the part of the most powerful man in the free world who become the U.S. president.
President Ilves, you want to come in on this?
I don't think you should be so America-centric. I mean, let's take a whole list of names. Kohl, Chirac, Sarkozy, Merkel, Schröder, of all people. It seems that everybody wants to get into the game of being the one who has, well, I forgot, of course, Sarkozy and Schultz, who the latter even gave a name, Schultzing, to the idea of constantly talking to Putin in the middle of a brutal invasion. No, I think it is, it's not just America, and it's not just since 2014. I think it is this a combination of two things. I mean, one is ego, thinking I'll be the one that solves this problem. And secondly, I think it's greed. I mean, the notion of Russia as El Dorado is something that we saw already in 1990 when Strauss, the U.S. ambassador, said, I wish I were a young man. I'd come here and get very rich. He was already rich, but anyway, so that's one problem. And then the other part is ego, that I'm going to solve this problem that other people have not. And then, of course, you have the mixture. In the case of Schröder, who I once coined a term, Schröderizatia, which is sort of basically using office to enrich yourself. I guess we see that a lot more these days in some countries, but I won't mention which. Nonetheless, I think that And plus, there's this third factor of this kind of romanticized idea of Russia based on, I mean, admittedly great literature from the 19th century. Unfortunately, Russia hasn't been there since the 19th century in terms of, you know, this romanticized idea of the soul. Not much soul since 1917, I would say.
Yeah, so hubris and also obfuscation of the facts. Okay, I want to turn now to Russia's war against Ukraine. The Israeli philosopher Yuval Harari had a good piece in the FT recently where he wrote, in 2025, the weakest link in Ukraine's defenses still lies in the minds of its Western friends. It seems like the West, Prime Minister Yatsenyuk, is constantly self-deterring, whether it comes to crippling sanctions, whether it comes to going after Russia's oil revenues, when it comes to mobilizing the frozen assets, or when it comes to providing Ukraine with high-end capabilities. Those have come, but they've come late. Why is it, or what more accurately are Western leaders afraid of? Are they afraid that Ukraine might not succeed, or are they actually afraid that Ukraine might succeed?
Well, you know, Mike, you're a seasoned politician. So you've asked me and actually provided the answer. So there is no reason for me to provide any kind of additional explanation. As this is the wrap-up session, so first of all, I want to commend Kasia. Kasia, you've done a tremendous job with this unbelievable, amazing forum, and you deserve applauses. Then I am just wondering, Mike, why don't you ask me about the U.S. presidents? Because, look, I had the privilege to work with 4 presidents of the United States, and I hope that they had the same privilege to work with me. And you know, and here is the thing: I still expect to work with President Trump, but he's busy, as far as I understand. And the thing is that I met a number of times face to face both Putin and his close entourage. And there is a deep misunderstanding and very deep misreading of designated war criminal Putin. Every single US president expected, and even President Trump, that Putin will play by the rules. Putin is always playing with the rules. So this kind of deep misunderstanding about the logics of this KGB operative, and look, he's very good in reading the people. He's very good. He knows psychology, as every single KGB agent, KGB operative, so he can actually very sophisticatedly talk to you, entice you. And these kind of things has driven a number of global leaders. And Mr. President, you are absolutely right. Americans are not the only one who expected that Russia will be the part of some kind of free world. Never. Answering your second question. Look, we have everything. Look at the free world. We got cutting-edge technologies, the strongest military in the world, huge human resources, pile of cash, different, starting with the dollars and ending with the euros, cutting-edge technologies. The only thing we miss is guts and strong political will. Ukrainians have been fighting against armed-to-the-teeth Russia, not for 3.5 years, for 11 years. And Russians didn't manage to take over Ukraine. So we have very resilient Ukrainian nation. And what is needed right now? Less summits, less different types of coalition, and very strong, bold actions. Going back to Putin, this is the only language that Putin understands. Strong action, strong response, and actually strength. And we can do it. We can do it.
But is there, just to follow up on this, but is there some sort of fear of what sometimes Americans call catastrophic success? Is there this notion that if Ukraine wins this war, that something is going to happen either inside Russia, or I don't know, Russia may use a nuclear weapon, or some other scenario that causes Western leaders to hold back? Or is it just simply they don't want to go after, I mean, you've talked about this, Bill, in terms of oil revenues, that they don't want to go after it because it's too comfortable to continue to consume Russian oil and gas. Is it more that, or is there some fear actually of winning?
Well, the main fear is fear itself. That's what Franklin Delano Roosevelt said, right? And it still exists. But look at the history. Russia has failed in a number of wars. Russo-Japan War, Crimean War, First Chechen War in Chechnya, Afghanistan War, and war against Ukraine. So we don't have to fear, we have to act once again. Whether Putin will saber rattle with the nukes, yes, he will. But whether he is ready to use these nukes, no, he don't. Because we have plenty of those even who support Russia, but they don't support Putin's decision or contemplation of Putin to use nukes. So once again, we are strong enough to win this war. We have everything on the table. But political will and guts are needed.
Thank you. Zhanna, I want to ask you about Russian patriots. I mean, arguably, those Russian patriots who believed in democracy, a lot of them have either gone to jail or been killed, right? There's a different type in Russia. They call themselves patriots. They go and they fight in Ukraine. They're not actually doing a service for their country, but they call themselves patriots and they believe themselves to be. My question for you is, when this war is over, which of these types of Russian patriots are going to win out within Russian society? Is it going to be the liberals who believe in democracy, who we know from interactions with people like your father in Moscow and St. Petersburg, or is it going to be this other segment of the population, which is, by all accounts, pretty numerous, who believe in continuing an imperialistic war against a neighbor for no reason? How do you see the future?
Great question. Very easy to answer. Well, I just want to comment on your first question, if I may. It's about reset. I think that one big difference between Russia and Western countries is that Russia hasn't seen any change of leadership for the past 25 years. And in Western nations, there is this constant change of leadership, and every new leader, as you rightly say, they want to reset their relations with Russia. And Putin uses this because he reads the people well, and he's trying to explain something to those new leaders, and they are buying this. And I understand the reasons, apart from probably they are vainglorious and they want to tackle this issue. So there are other things. Russia is a big country. It has abundant resources, and it's costly and risky to be at odds with Russia. And it's very difficult to explain to voters, because voters matters in the West, why we are at odds with Russia if we are not at war with Russia, at the hot phase of the war with Russia. So I think these are the reasons which Western leaders have when they try to launch a reset with Russia. On your question, to be honest, nobody knows. I know that there is one school of thought that after the fall of Putin regime, there will be a transition to democracy. I'm not sure about it. I think that chances are high that it's going to be a transition from one form of autocracy to another form of autocracy. However, I think some decisions that can be made today may play an important role. What I'm talking about is about strengthening the pro-democracy community broadly. I'm not speaking about civil activists, journalists, political leaders. I'm speaking about a big community many people who left Russia after 2022. I don't know the exact estimate. Might be up to 1 million people, and they left because of the disagreement with the war and because they didn't want to fight in Ukraine. And this community in the European Union, by definition, is toxic. If you're a holder of a Russian passport, you're toxic. And I think this community has been overlooked. And I'm talking too much, but it's going to be probably my one statement. Because you have already raised the question of immobilized assets in the European Union. And there is a big discussion around how to seize them and to send them to Ukraine. And we have heard the recent statement of the Prime Minister of Belgium, who opposes the idea to replace those assets with zero-coupon euro bonds, because he thinks it may shake their confidence in European markets and may trigger withdrawal.
And most of those bonds are located in
Euroclear. Belgium, yeah, everybody knows it. But yeah, it may trigger withdrawal of other sovereign funds controlled by non-democratic states from Europe, and I think it is a significant risk. But we do not speak about the composition of frozen assets, because a large share of those assets belong to non-sanctioned individuals, because their assets were mobilized because of the sanctioning of key elements of the Russian financial infrastructure, including Russian national depository banks and stock exchanges. And in Russia, many people, more than 3 million people, actually own foreign stocks and bonds because they believed in the European Union much more than they believed in Putin's regime. So, and now these assets are immobilized, so there is no access. And I think that we should talk about it, and I have some solutions. We should find a solution that can include the interests of Ukraine, and I know this solution.
Okay. President Ilves, you want to come in on this? Are these assets fair game?
Absolutely. Look, I pay much higher taxes because my country has had to raise its defense expenditure to 4.5%. Road projects in my country have ended because we have to raise our defense expenditures. That's my country. That's in every country almost in Europe. We have to pay more. What do we get out of this? So, I mean, everybody's going to lose money on this. It's too bad. Sorry. If you have money, your money is going to go. Well, my money is gone. Every Estonian's money is gone. Every German's money is gone. It's gone to spend money on things we didn't need to spend on only because of Russian aggression. So it's everyone's paying. We all pay for it.
And we're not going to face a Weimar Russia, because arguably we are already facing that phenomenon inside Russia, right? So the fear that we're going to create some sort of retributive instinct within Russian society.
We're far beyond Weimar. We're far beyond Weimar in Russia.
Yeah. Bill, I want to come to you on, I sort of teased out a little bit something that I've heard you talk about before, which is not the frozen assets, but the energy revenues. So this is a critical pillar of the Russian economy, about which few people know as much as you. And this is something that is well within the means of Western governments to curtail these energy revenues, right? So can you elaborate on this?
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. And in fact, that's my main message here at the Warsaw Security Forum, is that everybody always says, why are sanctions not working on Putin? Why is he continuing? Why is the Russian economy doing well? Why is he continuing to be so self-confident about this war? And the answer is because there's one enormous elephant in the room, which is oil. So Russia sells crude oil to the world between $200 and $300 billion a year. It's an enormous amount of money. And Russia uses that $200 or $300 billion a year to execute its war in Ukraine. And And by the way, as long as he has that flow of money, he will continue to fight that war in Ukraine. And so we need to come up with a way of him not having that money. Otherwise, there's no chance that he's going to back down. I don't believe in any of this ceasefire talk. I don't believe that Vladimir Putin in any way can cease fire because his own survival depends on being at war. If he wasn't at war, he wouldn't be in power. And if he wasn't in power, he wouldn't survive. And so he's going to carry on as long as he can. And the only way to make him stop carrying on is to take away his money. And so how do we stop this oil money from going to him? And it's the most elegant, simple, surgical solution. We've studied it, and there are 7 oil refineries in the world that buy all the Russian oil. 2 of them are in China, 4 of them are in India, and 1 of them is in Turkey. And so my proposal, and I've been marketing this to all members of parliament who I come around seeing in the last couple days, is we come up with a policy which is the EU, US, UK, Canada, Japan. And the policy is that, and we don't mention a country or we don't mention a business. We say you have 6 weeks from now to stop buying Russian oil. Any oil refinery that buys Russian oil after 6 weeks from now will be cut off from doing business with the rest of the world. You can't buy software, you can't buy new equipment, you can't bank, you can't have customers, and you have a choice. You can either do business with Russia and get your cheap oil and then cut off the rest of the world, be cut off from the rest of the world, or you can do business with the rest of the world and get your oil from Saudi Arabia or Venezuela or one of those other countries. If we were to put that in place, sure, some of this oil would still find a home, but it would find a home at a 75% discount to the current market price. And then Putin wouldn't get his $200 to $300 billion a year, and in 6 to 12 months, Putin would be begging for a ceasefire.
And this is something that can be done by G7 countries together.
And this is something that can be done next week. And by the way, and this is not, there's no inconsistency between US and EU. Donald Trump has been talking about this in a much more crude format. But this is a way you don't have to blow up trade relations between the EU and China. You just go after these specific refineries, and that solves the problem.
Great. Do you want to come in on this, Prime Minister?
Yep. Look at the numbers. In the last 5 years, Russia's revenues, I mean budgetary revenues from hydrocarbons, are practically flat, even despite the fact that severe sanctions have been imposed. So Russia gains around $130 billion per year as a budget revenues, and overall sale is more than $300 billion per year. So $130 billion, this is the exact number that Russia spends as a military expenditures in its efforts to try to conquer Ukraine. On the flip side, Russians say that sanctions are ineffective. That's not true. Look, Russians have lost completely the primary market of hydrocarbons in the European Union. Europeans managed to decrease the dependence on Russian oil by 80%. It was a staggering number a few years ago. You're absolutely right saying that there is a kind of silver bullet how to fix this problem. But in the broader scope, I believe that Russia has a close ally. It's not just about the refinery. This is about the state where the refinery is allocated. It is about China, and it is about India. So President Trump imposed some punitive actions against India. I believe that the better way to incentivize India not to buy the Russian oil and substitute this Russian oil, for example, with an American one, just to incentivize. In terms of China, situation is more complicated. Russia is fighting this war against Ukraine not just from the pure aim to conquer Ukraine. This is the broader war. Dictators against democracies. And China is interested in Russia's victory. That's my humble opinion. And it is not enough just to impose sanctions on the refineries. We have to present one united front, I mean the US, the EU, in pressing on China at least to become neutral, not to pretend neutral, because China provided a lifeline for Ukraine. China is accomplices in this war against Ukraine. So it's more just rather than technical decision. It has to be a big geopolitical decision. How to make those who help Russia to circumvent sanctions, how to make them at least neutral. Not to be engaged, not to be the part of this machine that finances the war chest of Russia.
So all of these solutions are going to require geopolitical cooperation. And right now we're in this phase where after the Alaska summit, we haven't seen any results from that. It looks on the surface like maybe the U.S. is going to withdraw from the process of trying to broker some sort of a deal, to use President Trump's language. So where do we go from here? Who picks up the baton to implement these policies, whether it's utilizing the frozen assets or curbing the energy revenues or providing arms to Ukraine? Is it European leaders collectively? Where does the center of gravity shift? And as a corollary to that, you know, European leaders have been largely on the sidelines while President Trump has been doing his diplomacy over these last 9 months. Should Europeans now take the reins in their own hands and push the U.S. off to the side, or do they need to continue to work with the U.S. on some of these concepts? Toomas, I'm looking at you.
Well, yes, Europe should pick up the baton, but I don't see it happening is the problem. You know, to go back to the initial premise of this discussion about the reset, you know, we have a 35-year problem in Europe with Russia, which is that the countries with experience with Russia have been discounted. Basically, it was only after February 24th, 2022, when Sanna Marin, the Prime Minister of Finland, said we should have listened to the Estonians, and then only a couple of weeks ago, Friedrich Merz said we should have listened to the East Europeans. I think somewhere Macron said something in Slovakia. I keep count but the point is that, you know, when we were talking about what Russia is doing, after Georgia was invaded, Estonia had big protests. And then they went to the Finnish president, Tarja Halonen, and said, well, why isn't Finland doing anything? And her response was, well, the Estonians are all suffering from post-Soviet traumatic stress, as if an entire nation was psychologically damaged. That was the kind of approach. As soon as we pointed something out that Russia was doing, if you were from Poland or Estonia or Lithuania, we were immediately Russophobes. It's like, no, we just have experience. So there's this anti-empiricist bias that we have only gotten over since February of 2022. And I don't know what to do with that. I mean, I think that sort of those old habits will die hard, and once we get something new in Russia, we'll be back to the same old thing of like, oh, those East Europeans, they're all paranoid, they don't know anything just because they happen to live next to Russia and have all this experience. We who have read Dostoevsky, or as I actually love the term, Tolstoyevsky, we know better because we understand the Russian soul. I mean, I'm fairly pessimistic, sorry.
Prime Minister Yatsenyuk, and then I want to come to you, Zhanna. I want to ask a permutation of essentially the same question, which is, at least among the European leaders, a lot of the diplomacy has been focused on these big meetings of the so-called coalition of the willing to talk about the composition and the mission for this reassurance force that would allegedly deploy to Ukraine. Now, I have a real problem with this concept because no European leader is willing to deploy this force until after a ceasefire. And last I checked, I didn't think that President Putin was willing to countenance European boots on the ground in Russia. So it seems like, to me, European leaders are tying themselves in knots discussing this reassurance force, which is kind of moot. It's kind of like a fantasy force, right? Am I wrong? Is there some traction there?
You're right for the second time, so no reason to answer. It's a kind of smoke and mirrors. It seems that sometimes we pretend to find the solution. But we have to make the solution, and we have to make the decision. The biggest priority right now is not to create a new type of coalition. We already have Rammstein. Look, what is the idea to invent some kind of new special purpose vehicles? We have NATO, we have Rammstein, we have G7. So let's use the tools that are in our hands. You've asked about Americans. Mike, here is the thing. I believe that we desperately need Americans on board. Desperately. Whether the EU can handle this war? Yes, it can. But I am not sure as effective alone. But in case if we get Americans, if we still have Americans, because there were some rumors that this administration tried to turn its back on Ukraine. So I don't believe these rumors. At least let's do our best to have them in full support of Ukraine. The reason why we need them, it's not just only because a desperate need of both financial and military resources, but this is the unity of the free world. If Putin and Xi succeeds in driving a wedge between the EU and the United States, God knows what's going to happen to NATO. So to wrap up, the key priority right now is to make Ukraine to win this war, period. And only afterwards, I am absolutely sure that we're going to find a number of ways how to provide the security guarantees. And the best security guarantee, I want to reiterate, is in Article 5. Article 5 of Washington Treaty, even despite the fact that the incumbent administration is skeptical, you have the vibrant democracy, and we still have a legally binding obligation of NATO member states issued in 2008, where that clearly states that Ukraine is to become a NATO member state. So as quick as we get the real peace on a fair terms and conditions, durable and just peace, the next step will be to provide the security guarantees for Ukraine, and in this way we can invent another new different types of coalition. But for today, the best coalition is the coalition of the free world to help Ukraine to win, because the situation is very complicated. Look, I want to be very clear. Because we are sitting in this hall, and that's great, and we are deliberating over how to help Ukraine, but Ukrainian fighters are right now at the front lines, paying the highest price, the price of the life of human being. And Ukrainian nation is still in the underground shelters or waiting for another air raid siren. And there is no end in sight.
President Ilves.
Just quickly, I mean, this boots on the ground hypothetical, I think, is sort of sounds like 12th century scholasticism on angels on a pin. What we ought to be looking at actually is planes in the air in a no-fly zone, which has been predicted from basically February 25th on. No, I mean, we can do it. I mean, look, the UK and the US provided air support for Israel just a couple of months ago. I mean, we can do it for Ukraine. And why we're not? We don't need troops on the ground. We need just planes in the air shooting down planes, Russian planes that are bombing Ukrainian cities.
So let me push you on that a little bit. So the first step in imposing a no-fly zone is to suppress enemy air defenses, which would mean Russian air defenses, many of them located on Russian territory. Is that where we should go?
Yes. Frankly, I mean, you can have a division of labor. I mean, Ukrainians are really good at taking air defenses out, so they can also take out air offense in Russia. And if anything does manage to come across, we shoot them down.
I would say there's also a light version of this, which would be imposing an air cap over Western Ukraine and allowing Ukrainians to fly over the contested front line.
Yeah, I mean,
areas.
look, we can talk about the intricate details, but all of that doesn't require sending troops. I mean, that's what everyone's fear is. Like, will Poland commit its troops to fighting? The East Europeans who are most supportive of Ukraine are also the ones who happen to be on the, frontline states, so that's where the reticence comes in on Poland or Estonia or Finland. So, I mean, but we don't need to get to boots on the ground. We need to, after a hypothetical ceasefire, which is just, I mean, right now, we should just go and stop all of those drones and planes and bombs and glide bombs that are killing Ukrainians every day.
I want to return to the diplomacy and the negotiations, and Zhanna, ask you about the Alaska summit. You've got this unfortunate image of U.S. soldiers literally on their knees rolling out the red carpet for Vladimir Putin, someone who has been indicted by the ICC for war crimes. What does this mean for accountability and for Putin's sense of impunity? Do you see the summit through the same lens as I do? Was this a reward for Putin that will allow him to evade the accountability that most of the world community wants to see happen?
Well, that's a question not for me, but for President Trump, who received President Putin in Alaska, right? And I think that President Trump acts in the same way as any other Western leader. He wants to pursue, to make a deal with Vladimir Putin. From the very beginning, my understanding was that Putin was not ready for any deal, for any ceasefire arrangement, and it seems that Putin is able to sustain a war effort for another couple of years, so he is sure of it. And yes, I agree that sanctions work, but they work slowly. They actually have resulted in the Russian economy lagging behind in terms of technological advancements, etc., etc. But I think they work not as effective as many wanted them to work when the EU and the US and other countries imposed those sanctions on Russia. So I just want to narrow up your question about the state of the Russian economy. So the Russian economy is not strong, but at least it's
But it did
okay.
grow in both 2023 and 2024, right? The Russian economy
I think part of the problem is that Russia, it's part of the problem for Western nations, and probably it's good for the Russian economy because it's not diversified. They mainly sell natural resources, and they have other markets. And that, of course, has been instrumental for Vladimir Putin. But now, I think there is a critical moment in the economy. So for the past 3.5 years, the government has managed to maintain an economic activity as if there were no war. So they have made investments into infrastructure, into construction of infrastructure, housing, construction, etc., etc. But now, in Russian society, many people understand that it's going to be a prolonged conflict, and it is a political opportunity for Putin to say, so your living standards are going to go down, and you're not going to be able to buy like durable goods, etc., etc. And he may take this opportunity, and in my opinion, he is able, unfortunately, to sustain a war effort for a couple of years. to come. So not answering about President Trump, it's for his administration to answer. But I think that probably his idea was to please Putin, to force him to have a sort of a deal. And when crafting any ceasefire arrangement, it's very important to pay very close attention to every detail, because one important thing is that any ceasefire agreement should prevent Russia from rearmament, because any lifting of any sanctions, especially technological sanctions, might give Russia a chance for rearmament, and in any ceasefire arrangement that should be taken into consideration.
Yeah, good point. I'm going to pivot soon in a couple minutes to audience questions. Just hold those questions, but get them ready. I've got one more question I want to ask all of you, but Toomas, you want to jump in on this? All carrots, no sticks, good negotiating strategy, or?
Well, I think we're not using any sticks, actually, in the West. I mean, we have this, what we're seeing right now is this, we have this bizarre term, hybrid or gray zone warfare, which to me is warfare. It's just that we don't want to say it's warfare, because, and you play on these, again, these scholastic definitions of, well, they haven't invaded our territory, but they are blowing up or burning down Europe's largest shopping center. They're putting bombs in DHL flights. I mean, we have this fear of doing anything even when we are attacked. And let's face it, we are being attacked.
So that's exactly the perfect segue, because that's where I want to go next with all of you before we turn to the audience. So we are in this war, right? I mean, we've had a swarm of drones come into Polish airspace. We've had MiG jets, okay, not firing bombs, but incurring into Estonian airspace. All the various other incidents you mentioned. And yet Western politicians are very reluctant to use the word war. And so they're left with the public sort of believing that everything is okay and that we've got this. But then, on the other hand, we're pretty close, as you mentioned, the incendiary bomb plot, to like a European 9/11, you know, perpetrated by Russia. So how do we change this? How can Western politicians actually be honest about the threat we face without making Russia seem 10 feet tall and inflating the threat and doing Putin's bidding by scaring the public and preventing the flow of support to Ukraine, which is probably part of his strategy with all of these incursions?
Cynically, I would say not before there's a mass casualty event on the order of 9/11, at which point it'll no longer be possible for politicians in Europe to say, oh, no, it's nothing, we don't want to do anything.
Anyone else on this? Bill?
I just want to say that there was a moment when when a Russian Air Force jet was flying over Syria, and I think it veered 17 seconds into Turkish territory, and they shot it down. And is there a war between Turkey and Russia? No. Have there been any more Russian jets flying into Turkey? No. Putin understands.
That is a good point. However, there were Turkish soldiers killed in Syria in both 2017 and 2020, roughly 35.
The point is that there's no war between the two countries. And Putin understands when the boundaries, he's a thug. He understands when there's a boundary, and he understands when there's not a boundary. I think one of the worst things that we ever did in the West was this whole idea that we were so desperate about escalation that Putin saw that, and he said, if they're so scared of escalation, then he can do whatever he wants. And so, you put a firm boundary there, Putin will actually respect it. And if you don't, he will push and push and push.
Fear of escalation escalates. All right, let's turn to the audience for questions. Let's do a round of three. I'm going to start with the gentleman here in the front row, and then over to you.
Thank you very much. Konstantin Agat, Deutsche Welle. I would actually like to ask a question of you, Mr. Carpenter, too, as a politician, and President Ilves and Prime Minister Yatsenyuk. Bill Browder offered a recipe of dealing with the elements of the global south with the refineries. But generally we understand that the support by India, by China, and other elements of the global south is very important for Putin. So are there political ways, or any other ways apart from the refineries, of impacting Lula Tsimpinovich Modi, if we may?
Great, thank you. And then you had a question here also in the front row, and then we'll go to the gentleman there.
Miroslava Pats, BBC Ukrainian Service. I have a question to Ms. Zhanna Nemtsova. You're against using the frozen Russian assets to help Ukraine. You mentioned that you have a way out so that Ukraine benefits as well. But I just wanted to ask you this question. Do you think it's even, moral to kind of think that using frozen Russian assets is not good to Russian? Is it okay in the state of war that Ukraine's been experiencing for more than 11 years now because of Russian actions? To even discuss that,
okay,
you can buy peace with money.
I think we get it. We got 2 minutes and a half left. So, sir, please ask your question, and then we'll turn it to the panelists.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Alexandru. I'm from Romania, and the question is for all the panelists. I believe that the war did not start in 2022, but in 2014, and the Allies did too little and too less for too little and too late for Ukraine. From your point of view, what NATO, what EU should have been done differently for Russia to not continue the full-scale invasion in 2022?
Great, thank you. Let's start with Zhanna.
Thanks for your question. I think probably I didn't explain my position clearly, and I will repeat. I'm for the seizure of sovereign assets of the Russian Federation, but I only mentioned that there are some concerns voiced by the Prime Minister of Belgium. I just quoted him. I am not against it. I am for it. But second, I just want to draw your attention to the fact that that the structure of those assets is a little bit more complicated than we think it is. So a large part of those assets belong to the Central Bank of Russia, but another part belongs to both sanctioned and unsanctioned individuals and entities. I was talking about the second part, what we can do with the second part and how we can craft a solution that it will benefit Ukraine. I discussed today in the morning those solutions behind the closed doors. I don't think that this stage is right to do this. I discussed it also with some Ukrainian colleagues here. That's what my whole first statement was about. I am for the seizure of sovereign assets, as many other Russians.
Great, thank you for correcting the record. Prime Minister Yatsenyuk.
Well, answering the question that honorable gentleman from Romania asked, sir, we don't have time machine. The historians will then judge what was wrong, what was right. I believe that what is needed right now, we need to turn the screw on Russians. We need to get real substantial support for Ukraine, a new security supplemental for Ukraine, financial aid for Ukraine, secondary sanctions for Ukraine, unity between the US and the EU. And in this way, an honorable gentleman from Deutsche Welle, we can get along with Prime Minister Modi. Let me reiterate once again. There is no reason to go after Modi. It is better actually to incentivize him, to get him on board. Otherwise, he will be with Russians and Chinese, and he actually did it.
Thank you. I associate myself with those comments. President Ilves.
Okay, on the historical question, I would say denial of the membership action plan to Georgia and to Ukraine in May of 2008 set in motion and gave a green light for Russia to do all it has done since 2008.
Bill Browder, the last word goes to you.
I think someone said it before, Putin is not 10 feet tall. The only thing he respects is a boot on the throat. We absolutely should not be holding back. I've been personally fighting with him for 15 years. Thank God I'm still here, and we all should be fighting with him in every way we can. And there's a lot of good ideas that came out today, and we should push hard militarily, financially, diplomatically to isolate them so that this war ends. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for a fascinating discussion. Please join me in a round of applause for our panelists.
Outstanding panel, the last panel of the Global Outlook track here on the stage today. There is one more bit coming up, though. I'll get to that in just a second. We need to clear the stage away first. But just a couple of comments from me personally, having served as your moderator here on this stage this afternoon. This is my seventh, thank you very much. This is my 7th year at the Warsaw Security Forum, and I must say, it's been fascinating to watch it evolve and grow, and I've never felt the sense of resolve and determination and unity that has come together among the countries represented here today, their speakers. It's been a great privilege for me to participate in these discussions, and I'm very happy that I've had the opportunity to come back here so many times. I want to thank everyone for sticking with us here through to the end today, because what's coming up right now is the closing ceremony, and it's my pleasure to introduce someone who needs, again, no introduction, Katarzyna Pisarska, the chair of the Warsaw Security Forum, with closing remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Well, what a 2 days it was, really. Thank you so much for holding on with us. Thank you for contributing to these exceptional discussions. I have to say, I said it in a number of forums here during the last 2 days. I think it was the most productive and most importantly, the more upbeat, if I can say,